This is very much even into my childhood. These figures were made by an old man who worked on my father's farm when I was a child. Children might like to see what Scandinavian children actually played with. This is a Viking spindle world. It was dug out of the earth on my family farm in Sweden in about, I should think, about the 1880s. And you can even see the mark of the first owner there. Very faint. It's, I think, Norwegian soapstone. There was a trade in soapstone between the Nordic countries. So I often think of the first owner and I wonder who she was.
See it? The first we know about the sword was when it was lent to an exhibition at the Blacksmiths Institute in 1860, and that went with a label that said, "Found in the River Ouse adjacent to Cawood Castle." It is probably the finest sword of its date anywhere in the country, if not in northwestern Europe. It's about 1100 when it was made, which makes it a late Viking sword. Why do we think it's a Viking sword? Well, this little thing at the end here, on the very top. To orientate yourself with swords, the long, sharp, pointy bit is the blade. I'm sure you all know that bit. This bit's called the guard. This bit, the bit you hold, is called the hilt, or the grip. And this bit at the end is called the pommel. And it's symbolically a fist. I'm going to pommel you in this. I'm going to pommel this camera with this. And if you ever watch commentating on boxing, for instance, you'll hear that they're pummeling each other. And it's because it comes from this part of the sword. And that's where the verb pummel comes from. You're using the back end of it, the pommel, the five-lobedy bit, it's supposed to be a fist, as something to hit somebody with in their head. Because don't forget, it's a lovely thing, it's a very pretty object, but it's a functional object. It's meant to do damage. It's an object of warfare. It's meant to hurt, to kill. Now, that's a good Viking-style pommel. That's actually a good medieval-style crossguard. Viking swords, if you have a look at Chris's replica one there, have very short, stubby little crossguards, which are fine for protecting your thumb and your finger, but not much use actually when it comes to fighting with a sword. One of these things actually not only protects your hand, and don't forget, if you've got a sword, sir, if you just stand as you're sat in the front row, if you had a, even better, if you had a sword, and I'm going to win this one, so I feel confident, okay. If you had a sword and you're attacking me, and what would you attack first for me to lose my sword? Where would you hit? Absolutely, on my hand. I'm going to chop through my wrist, drop my sword, and I'm going to be going around going, oops, help. Right? You're going to run me through with your foam sword. But because I've got my little crossguard here, actually what I'm hoping is I'm going to be able to channel your... Do you want to try again? I'm going to try and channel it down and protect my hand and my finger as I'm using that. But also what I'm going to be able to do with that, if it wasn't full, obviously, I'm going to twist it and you're going to lose out your hand, and then I'm going to use the sharp pointy bit to run you through. So we make our blade, we polish our edge incredibly sharp, and it still is. I mean, this end up here, protected by the hilt, although it won't cut my finger, actually is as sharp as a modern day knife is. Towards the bottom end of it, it's pitted a lot more from corrosion. But it's still, you still get an idea of how sharp the tip might have been. We made that. We make it a certain length. It's around about 82 to 88 centimetres for a good medieval sword blade. There are many reasons for that, but the one I like best is that you're carrying this thing in a scabbard on your belt. And I'm, 5'10", whatever, standard thing. If I try and draw that any longer, I'm running out of arm. And I can't get out the scabbard. So again, these really long two-handed things you see, they're all wielding around, absolute rubbish. You couldn't fight with one of those at all. This blade is special for another two reasons. I don't know if you can see actually, but in the middle of this blade there's what we call the fuller, which is a sort of groove in it. And there's lots of reasons why you have a fuller in a blade, it makes it lighter, etc. And one of the more gruesome ones is that if you ever ran anybody through with a sword that didn't have a fuller in it, inside your body there's a lot of liquid, a lot of air. And I won't have to demonstrate, but if I ran it through somebody, it would get stuck. Simple as that. It would just stick in there. And there's no way I can pull it out. There's lots of documentary evidence of people running somebody through and the sword gets stuck and literally, foot into the chest and it's not coming out. Because it creates a suction, a really, really strong suction. So they put the fuller in to allow a bit of air to get in there to break that suction. So you can pull it out and have a go at the next guy. So that's what it's for. Or one of the reasons why it's for. But within the fuller on this sword, on either side of the blade, there's an inscription. Now, I defy anybody to actually be able to see it from there, but believe me, there's an inscription. And it starts with a cross and ends with a cross on both sides. And it's a series of letters. They make no sense as words at all. They just are a series of letters. And it reads N-E-P-S-R-D-I-C-A-T and a few other ones at the end there. And it's on one side, it's in what we call Lombardic letters, Lombardic script. Nothing to do with the Lombardic people in Northern Italy, but just actually a type of script that was popular in the early medieval period. On the other side, we have it in medieval capitals. It is a capital very defined, and it's the same letters. So we have an inscription running down both sides of the blade, which makes it really rare. There's only 5 swords in Europe at this date that have inscriptions on them, and the best one comes from Cawood. Why is it in such good condition? Well, there are many reasons, really. When it first came to light, a lot of people said, well, actually, I think it's a fake. I don't think it's real, I don't think it's very old, I think somebody made it today. It's not, you'll be glad to know. It is about an element of date. We can export a technique called X-ray fluorescence, and you can tell the steel and the iron content of the sword and compare it to the swords of the date. The other thing that makes this sword really interesting is that if you ever go to Oslo, in the National Museum, there is a brother or a sister to this sword. It was found in Norway in a place called Kaisergarden in Stavanger in Norway in 1880. A deliberately buried sword in its scabbard with a shield in what we call a stone kist, a stone burial. A little square made out of stones. Somebody deliberately buried the sword, the scabbard and the shield. Prior to 1880, there's lots of Viking sagas about when you hang up your spurs, you retire as a Viking warrior, you bury your weapons. No archaeological evidence has taken place at all until 1880 when they were found. That's a really interesting thing in itself. But the fact that the sword is so close in style, so close in formation and decoration to this one from Cawood is really interesting. You don't get that level of comparison at all between two things, let alone one from Norway and one from North Yorkshire. The other thing that's really interesting about it is it has a ring, a band round the top with runic inscription in it. And somebody asked me what the runic inscription said, and I really can't remember. Except for the fact it said, I'm sure it says it belongs to somebody, and it gives a personal name. But the style of the runic letters dates it very closely to 1100, plus or minus 50 years. So here we have a sword in North Yorkshire from Cawood that we don't know the date of. We don't know really where it came from, other than the label said it came out the river, next to the Cawood Castle. We've got one from Norway in a very secure archaeological context with a date of 1100. So we can say, actually, we think this sword was made round about 1100. Was it made by the same person? Possibly. Certainly, probably in the same place, because they're so similar in look, in design. Whether they're made by the same person, we don't know. You do get maker's stamps on swords. This one hasn't got one, unfortunately, unless these weird letters actually make something that has some relation to who manufactured it in the first place. But certainly there are two swords sharing a very common heritage. A very wealthy person commissioned and bought and probably paid for both of them. One in Norway, one in North Yorkshire. Now, we all know the Viking heritage of North Yorkshire, particularly this part of North Yorkshire, and particularly the river. So there's a really nice, story to be made that two, let's call them brothers, but whatever, two Norwegians of high status commissioned two swords. One stays in Norway, one gets on the Viking fleet, heads over to Yorkshire, for some reason dies, or loses his sword, or gives it up, or whatever, around Cawood. I think that's a really nice thing, and it's really hard in archaeology particularly to get those personal stories out. Of course, I'm making it up, but hey, that's never stopped a good museum curator doing that before. But actually, that's what makes it really interesting, I think. It's really nice. It's just a special sword, and you won't see one like it in this country, and you certainly won't be able to handle one like this in this country outside of this village hall today, or school today, sorry. So it's just a really nice thing. I mean, that's it, really. It's a lovely sword. I can say lovely a few more times in the sentence. It is a gorgeous thing, and it's a real privilege to have it in my collection, and I hope that's been made sense and enjoyable. I have to judge the Vikings and then make a quick, sharp getaway. Now, I think we should have a little test, though, don't you? Because they look very good like Vikings, but do they sound like Vikings? I'd like you all to just roar as loud as you possibly could do on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm not very scared. Are you ready? Louder. 1, 2, 3. Hey, thank you, that's much better. In my checklist of what a Viking is, it's beardy, weirdy facial hair. I can see a very good beardy, weirdy facial hair. It's a very good sword. I can see lots of good swords. It's a nice battle axe. It's good shield. It's green football socks. That's particularly fetching. Because the one thing, of course, we all know the Vikings wore was very long socks. So I think for the chap who's trying to be a little bit older, by drawing a nice little goatee beard and a moustache in good Viking style with good brooch and delightful macrame top, sir, you win a prize as a Viking. I think for the green football socks, and the beard, and the horned helmet, and the battle axe, and probably the loudest roar, you're a very fine Viking. I think, actually, for authenticity, you know, what we really need is a pair of brown leather boots, a good sword, a good shield, and a very sparkling brooch. You're a very fine Viking.